Here is a bulletin from CBS News. In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade in downtown Dallas. There has been an attempt, as perhaps you know now, on the life of President Kennedy. He was wounded in an automobile driving from Dallas Airport into downtown Dallas, along with Governor Connolly of Texas. They've been taken to Parkland Hospital there, where their condition is as yet unknown. We have just learned, however, that Father Huber, one of the 2 priests called into the room, has administered the last sacrament of the church to President Kennedy. From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
The bulletin is that our correspondent in Dallas, Dan Rather, reports that the Dallas police have arrested a 30-year-old man who was found with a weapon in his possession.
Here is the suspect. Re-roll it, please.
Did you shoot the president?
I didn't shoot anybody, no, sir.
You just heard Oswald, who said he did not shoot anybody.
This was a CBS News special report.
From the haunted heartland in Omaha, Nebraska, my name is Brian Corey, and I welcome you one and all to this episode of the Necronomicast. 58 years ago, tragedy unfolded in Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas, as the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, was gunned down in broad daylight. The aftermath of that fateful day is still unfolding as researchers and historians, like my next guest, continue to ask the questions and search for answers of what really happened. Craig Ciccone is one such researcher and historian, and his diligent, thorough, and important work continues on not only the events of November 22nd, 1963, but on all political assassinations of the 1960s. Join me and Craig on our pursuit of truth on this episode of the Necronomicast. And now from Michigan, I'm really excited to have on the program Craig Ciccone. Craig, thanks for joining me on the Necronomicast this evening.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. A little background on me. My parents were much older when I was born. My dad was 70 when I was born. My mom was 40. And so my parents were different than other parents growing up. You know, it was kind of like growing up with grandparents almost in a way. And my dad, I never had real adult conversations with him about JFK, about the assassination. But just growing up, he was 59 when the president was shot and killed in 1963. And when I was growing up, if I heard him say anything around Election Day or any time like that, he always made it known that he did not believe that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. So that's how I kind of grew up. Read Mark Lane's book, did a little bit of research here and there just because I always found it interesting. So to have you on the program, I hope, I pray for your patience in dealing with me because you know way more than I do. So I'm kind of getting like an expert's take on this strange case of President Kennedy's assassination.
Not at all. It's never too late to learn. And I'm just glad that you have, the initiative to learn more about it. I just, as a personal note, I find it that you said that there were 30 years between your parents. There were 30 years between my parents too.
Wow. Well, there you go.
Yeah. So
who was older?
My father was 30 years older than my mother, but I didn't grow up with him. So, but oddly enough, it was one of her friends. I don't know what it was that he saw in me, but unprompted, he brought over one day when I was in high school a whole box of JFK memorabilia, including teletypes from when the House Select Committee on Assassinations was going on, a bunch of books on the Kennedy assassination. And the first one that I picked up was They've Killed the President by Robert Sam Anson. And I was hooked. I could not put it down. And I was intrigued by the case, I think, because I was, that arrogant teenager who not only thinks that they know more than their parents, but after reading that book, I was thinking to myself about my mother, how could you have lived through that and believed anything that came out of, the New York Times? basically a sound piece for the Warren Commission. It was just flabbergasting to me. I couldn't believe that my mother's generation bought such an obvious, to me, an egregious lie.
An egregious lie indeed. And maybe I benefit now from all these years of research that people have done before me, and I can read what all the hard work that people have put into this. But so I don't have the perspective of it unfolding in front of me. But I mean, they didn't even have the Zapruder film right away to kind of analyze that. But yeah, just to buy it kind of hook, line, and sinker, even though so much of it does not add up.
Well, what does that tell you right there? That we did not have the Zapruder film for another 13 years. What is it, 13? 63, 75, 12 years. For another 12 years, public did not see the Zapruder film.
It took Geraldo Rivera to have like a bootleg copy that I don't even know how he got it, but he was the one that
it was Robert Groden. It was Robert Groden who got a copy of a copy of a copy out of the National Archive. It was a black and white, even though the film was color. And that's all he had to show. But Geraldo Rivera showed it.
Yeah, he unleashed it to the world. And so from there, the groundbreaking work by Mark Lane, almost immediately after the assassination, when things didn't add up. And I know you've done all this research, and I can't wait to get into it with you, but I just get into these rabbit holes of, I'm reading, and then I'm like, CIA. Oh, okay. The mafia. Okay. And then you just get into everything. And within 3 years of the assassination, 18 people, witnesses connected to the case in some way, and somehow some of them mysteriously die, but 18 people die within 3 years of the assassination. And just the absurdity of a single person firing off these shots. And now even it's 2021, and just last week we were looking for disclosure of some more information that's been delayed. Who knows when that's coming out? I mean, it doesn't end. It's not ending.
All right. Yeah, no, it isn't. There's always something to protect, whether it's a reputation or it's actual secrets, actual secrets that would actually allow us that would illuminate the case and illuminate some of the characters in this case. I know for a lot of people, they are fascinated by the person of Lee Harvey Oswald. And as a historian, as somebody who's worked on not just this political assassination, but other political assassinations, one of the things that you first try to do is find all of the intelligence documents there are, because it has a perspective that you can't find anywhere else. Now, you have to be able to discern what perspectives are true and what aren't, what's supposition and what's actually steeped in fact. Intelligence documents are incredibly rich. And so just trying to find out who Lee Harvey Oswald was, even though he was proclaimed to have been just some lone nut without any help from anybody, shot Kennedy and Governor Connolly and J.D. Tippit and tried to, Edward Walker. So now all of a sudden he's this homicidal maniac. But anyway, they claim he's this kind of person, but would not allow us access to the very documents that would show what kind of person he was. So, and that's what's been really frustrating. So as most of the evidence points to some kind of intelligence work on his part, I can't tell you what agency or for how long or to what extent, but obviously there are fingerprints of intelligence all over his background and his actions. We can't establish who he was and what he did without those documents. I think that's why a lot of people look very anxiously to having these last tens of thousands of documents released under the Kennedy Act.
So tens of thousands of potential disclosure.
CIA documents, absolutely.
Sure. Okay. Now, how is that even different than what? Okay. Well, like we had the Warren Commission, 26 volumes, almost 20,000 pages of documents that were released, all condensed down also to a 900 plus page summary of everything. And well,
technically, it was only about a 23-page summary because they started their book with the conclusion. And if you can think of any other book that starts with a conclusion, it's almost as if it said to the American public, who Alan Dulles actually lambasted as an uninterested public, that they would never read the record, which is why they put their conclusions right front of their 900-page report, as if to say, public, you don't have to read anything else. Just read our conclusions, which is at the front of the book. Don't bother with the rest of it.
No. And it was never really about if Oswald did it. It was always about how he could have done it, and just the mental gymnastics that people had to go through to even speculate that he had a role in it. Just right. I mean, just counting the shots, counting the bullets. I mean, just even that, shooting the gun that far, that wasn't even a sniper's rifle. It wasn't even like a true marksman's rifle. I mean, just,
absolutely.
Just everything. None of it makes any sense. And then you've got these 26 volumes of this Warren Commission, and there's no reference to the autopsy. There's nothing about the medical records of Kennedy after he was shot. That's not even in there. You've got a million other things that are in these volumes of books that have nothing to do with Dealey Plaza, that have nothing to do with 11/22/63. Right. And you don't even have the autopsy report. I mean, I know earlier we said that, it's hard to believe that the American public was so hoodwinked, but the American public was certainly hoodwinked.
Well, at that point in time, we still had a trust and faith in our institutions. And so it would be another 10 years for, the watershed event of Watergate that would, rein us in our ability as far as government agencies are concerned. So I think that it is not a coincidence that at the time that Watergate breaks and we have a president resign, that we have interest then in the CIA and the FBI so that they are investigated with the Church Committee, 1976, and then just a couple of years later with the House Select Committee on Assassinations, reinvestigating President Kennedy's assassination and that of Martin Luther King. Why they did not, however, include Robert Kennedy's assassination is beyond me. At the time that the House Select Committee on Assassinations was convening, the LAPD final report on Robert Kennedy's assassination still had not been released. And that's something else that just completely blows me away and is the biggest red flag as far as a cover-up is concerned, or at least an unwillingness to be scrutinized. That final report of the LAPD on the Robert Kennedy assassination wasn't released publicly until 1988. And how that was even let stand, it's beyond me. So, there are some people who apologize for the conduct of government agencies and say, well, that kind of, inefficiency happens all the time. But there comes a time when you make a list of all of these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mistakes, errors, oversights, obfuscations, where it no longer ceases to be just a matter of fact that, well, all agencies do that. Given the chaos of the time and how, your reputations are on the line. And so, there comes a time when people have to take, there has to be accountability.
So accountability, yeah, sure. But we're looking at the president of the, what I always go back to, and I always think of when I try and distill it down to just the basic incident, the president of the United States, who as a child, I was always told the most powerful man in the world, the leader of the free world. The president of the United States is shot and killed in front of hundreds of people in the world, but there immediately. It's just amazing to me that whoever pulled the trigger, however that was planned, it's just amazing that it's still kind of hidden, covered up, part of this American mystery.
Right.
That's not going to be solved, anytime, probably soon. I mean, not anytime soon, certainly, but probably never really be full disclosure about really what happened.
Right.
But incredible that there's powerful forces out there, more powerful, pulling the strings, that we have really no idea what's going on.
Well, and please don't forget that the influence of these names of Kennedy and Connally still wield a great deal of power, because to have things happen, to try to recover evidence that was never attempted to be recovered in the first place, you have to have a court order or the family's permission. Okay, so all of this banter about, and it has been, I think, since day one. Okay, let's exhume President Kennedy. Well, you know how much of a that will be to climb. But the fact that the autopsy materials still have not been released, the fact that no definitive time frame or even chain of possession of the missing autopsy materials has been established, and the fact that Nellie Connally allowed John Connally to be buried without the metal still in his wrist and thigh to be removed, that really should have been thought of as, well, covering up evidence or destroying evidence, if you want to go that far. So the fact that we don't have a judge that has the balls to say, you know what, public interest trumps your feelings at this point, especially when we're 60 some years removed. Okay, you've had time to heal. You've heard all the arguments, even though you won't participate in these arguments publicly. It's Robert Kennedy's children who are speaking about JFK assassination. Not, it wasn't John F. Kennedy Jr. It wasn't Caroline. It wasn't Jackie. It was, So and the reputations still carry a lot of weight and prevent things from finally being established. I mean, that's really what I think we're all working towards, is to come to a consensus, because the government screwed up the investigation so badly to the point where there will be questions that will never be answered because the evidence is gone. It was destroyed. We had our opportunity to look at it, but the government decided. And when I say government, I use a very broad term, government. The authorities had these opportunities. They had the material in their hands, but instead of analyzing, instead of documenting, instead of preserving them, they let them either be destroyed or lost or hidden away. But we just want a consensus with certain things. The fact that we're still arguing about the Zapruder film is also perplexing to me. You talk about a film that no film in the world has ever been analyzed so with such scrutiny as the Zapruder film, and we still can't come to a consensus. And I'm one of those people who do not believe that Governor Connally was struck at 2:36 or in that area. There wasn't a 1.5 second delay between that you see President Kennedy visibly hit when he emerges from the side. And when Connally is hit, I think Connally is hit a fraction of a second before the headshot. Because once again, my interpretation of the Zapruder film is based simply on what I see, which is, which can be completely different from what somebody else sees. And the fact that we don't have sound on the Zapruder film means that the Zapruder film cannot be used as a measure of how many shots were fired. That's the other problem. So the timing of the shots is even off now, because you're looking at a silent film during which 20 shots could have been fired. But it doesn't mean you'll see the damage, because it's a scope lens, right? He's looking at a very specific part of Dealey Plaza, so you're not looking at the sidewalk. You're not looking at everywhere else where bullets bouncing or hitting. And we don't have sound. So Unfortunately, the Zapruder film is not going to give us a whole lot of answers, but we can't come to a consensus with that either. But now I'm getting off on a tangent.
No, that's good, because I was just even going to say, there's these theories about the magic bullet. And like you said, we don't even know how many shots have been fired. We know there was a bullet that hit Kennedy's head. Okay, there's that one. We know that there was a bullet that missed the motorcade because it hit a curb, hit a bystander.
Right. Yep.
And then there was a bullet that went through two men, Kennedy and Connolly.
Right.
We other than that, they just kind of decided that was going to be the magic bullet.
Absolutely. They wanted the evidence to fit their theory as opposed to the other way around. So when it got time to counting up all the bullets and then counting up all the fatal and non-fatal wounds to both men, they simply ran out of bullets and came up with this theory that, unless we're going to admit that more than 3 shots were fired, one has to have had gone through both men. It's that simple. It wasn't a scientific determination. It wasn't that fragments were taken out of Kennedy and fragments were taken out of Connolly, and those two, they were analyzed and, they came from the exact same bullet. But I'm also one of those people who don't believe that if you are able to line up both men, because we have all these 3D computer animations now to make it look realistic, and we can float anywhere around Dealey Plaza and see all their trajectories. And they establish, hey, these two guys do line up in the limousine. It doesn't matter. The question was never, were they lined up to be able to have a bullet pass through them? Because you're assuming that the only bullet that could have passed through them was from the 6th floor of the textbook school book depository. We got 3 other buildings. We've got how many other floors? The point is, what makes the single bullet theory not plausible, is what they've asked of the one bullet that was recovered. So can a bullet go through 2 men? Absolutely. Can a bullet go through 2 men, going through 12 layers of cloth, 7 layers of flesh, breaking 2 bones in a man stood 6'4", and then come out with minimal damage? Absolutely not. And the FBI's tests proved that couldn't happen.
Yeah, they did tests through cotton batting. They shot a goat, I think they did. And then
a rib of a goat. Yep.
Yeah. And then they shot a cadaver, like in the wrist.
Yep. The wrist of a cadaver. And with each they wanted to simulate the wounds from Kennedy and Connolly. So the cotton wadding would be his neck, the rib, obviously Connolly's rib, and then the wrist, obviously Connolly's wrist. And with each succeeding test, the bullet got more and more mutilated, losing more and more of not just its shape, but also of its actual mass. So these were individual bullets fired in individual things, and this is the damage that happens to them. But they say that Commission Exhibit 399 flattened slightly at the base and losing maybe 2 grains of weight went through 12 cloth, 7 layers of flesh, 2 bones. Yep. That's what makes this theory impossible. Not that Kennedy was too far over one way and that if the bullet came out of his neck, it would have gone into the car. We can talk about those kind of theories and trajectories all we want. Let's just get down to the basics. One bullet could not damage that was inflicted on that day to those 2 men. Just like you said, the gun itself did not have the capacity to do that, to do what it was attributed to. So,
you have to start looking for Occam's razor too. I mean, if your best scenario is not Occam's razor, right, you need to strongly look at what your best guess is again. And you don't start with the conclusion of your book, like you said earlier, in order to establish, what happened that day. What do you make of the stories about, mob ties and things like that? I don't see how the mafioso would try and do something like this that publicly. You know what I mean? There's probably many opportunities that somebody can get in and do that to an elected official, but just the
right,
sheer public display to do that there. It's so that's what it's the the grisliness of it, of that happening in front of that many people so publicly, so brazenly.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it always comes back down to me. Like, I can't believe that, that happened in that way.
Yep. But again, let's not confuse the argument about mob being behind it as being the masterminds. People can be a part of a conspiracy and not even know that they're part of a conspiracy. Perfect example is James Hosty, the FBI agent from the Dallas office who not only interviewed Marina, but wanted to talk to Lee Harvey Oswald. And because he kept missing Oswald and tried to talk to Marina, Oswald got upset. So goes to the office, wants to speak to Hosty. Hosty's not there yet again, writes him a note. Then after the assassination, the note comes up. His supervisor says, nope, there's not going to be a trial, so just destroy it. So he flushes it down the toilet. Hosty not even his supervisor could have read the thing and said, oh, wow, okay, this is really going to be a key piece of evidence in the case, so you better destroy it. It's Hosty was an FBI agent. His supervisor told him to do something, and he did it. It's that simple. Now, where Hosty knew what kind of significance this note would have had, we don't know what was in the note, or at least all we have is Hosty's allegation, what was on the note. But so when you are trying to cover something up, trying to complete something, and need other people's operation, the very definition of a conspiracy. So the mob obviously could not have masterminded this whole thing. They didn't have access to all the echelons of the government officials and agencies that had a hand in either investigating or handle the evidence of the JFK assassination. But what they did have is they did have influence. They did have knowledge of assassination, assassins, whether it's groups of assassins or individual assassins, mercenaries. They did have a lot of money. So could they have contributed in some way that way to get something done? Absolutely. Could they have sent somebody like Jack Ruby, who had ties to the mob, to be the fall guy for the guy who killed Oswald? Absolutely. So on a smaller role, and maybe, but we've already established that our government, the CIA particularly, had a cooperative relationship with the mafia. So since that's already been established, it's not a great leap to say that they will use them once again in trying to cover up this particular case for whatever the reason is. Now, if you want to say that the CIA was also behind Kennedy's assassination, I certainly think that the CIA had the best motivation for wanting him dead. But it certainly had the means. But I'm just saying, did the mafia have a hand in it? It is certainly plausible, given the intelligence agency's history with the mafia, saying that, the Attorney General, Robert Kennedy, saying what a problem this is, and then J. Edgar Hoover saying, oh, there's no problem. And then the CIA using the mafia to do its bidding, in certain corners of the world. So, it's not middle-aged guys sitting in their mother's basement dreaming up conspiracy theories that lend itself to these kinds of theories. It's some of these elements have already been established that, yeah, this is possible because it's happened before, and which is exactly why the FBI and the CIA investigated in the 1970s, because of their very willingness to work with criminal elements, whether it's domestic or foreign, to get their agenda done. And their agenda, a lot of the times, wasn't even in line with our foreign policy agenda. I don't even know if I answered the question or if I was just...
Yeah, because you said that, people could be part of a conspiracy and not even know it.
Or just be we're giving you the money. We're not planning it, or we'll hire this team and they'll be in Dallas. You do what you want with them.
Wow. So earlier you just said in that answer, you were talking about the CIA motivation to have Kennedy disposed of. What would be some of can you touch on that for a little bit? Like the CIA motivation why the Central Intelligence Agency would want this popular president not in control anymore.
Well, I think a very important preface to that would be that throughout the existence of our country, there have always been, quote unquote, patriots, very passionate, very pro United States of America. The country is more important than one person. Doesn't matter who that person is. If it's the president of the United States, no president, no person is worth the future of the country. So if you have sycophants, extremist, powerful, corrupted patriots who have been well-trained, well-funded, and of course, by that time, really unfettered. The creation of the CIA did not create with it an oversight committee. The CIA was basically left to do what it wanted to do. It didn't have to justify its budget. It didn't have to show what it was doing with that budget. It didn't even have to show what it was doing. So they have all this power very quickly, and it is not unheard of. It is not so foreign of an idea that somebody in this country or a group of people in this country would say, once again, out loud, no man is worth the future of our country. And if they are convinced that President Kennedy was a communist, or that he was going to, if he was going to stop nuclear proliferation with Russia and become allies with Russia, if President Kennedy was going to limit the military budget, if he was going to actually take the reins of the CIA, like Eisenhower had warned the country should happen, talking about the military-industrial complex. If Kennedy wanted to say, okay, CIA, which he did say, you are now answerable to the NSA. And what I'd like to do is to take your organization, break it apart, and then put it back together again. So here's this young, cocky president who listened to his advisors at first, and then the Bay of Pigs happened, then stopped listening to the military advisors and instead created his own inner circle of confidants. And I think he was really embarrassed by the CIA, which is why he fired Dulles, why he fired Cabell, and why he threatened to basically completely restructure the CIA. And the one thing you don't do to an intelligence organization is threaten them with either extinction or no money, or, they're entirely too powerful and influential to let that happen. And so I think there was, you can establish a motivation for saying Kennedy is sending us down the wrong path. The world is changing, and the change is not good. The change that he wants is not good. It will make us weaker. The Russians will either bomb us into submission and take over our country. I mean, we're still hip deep in the Cold War. So fears like that, extremist fears like that, we're running very high. So again, it's not unreasonable to think that the upper echelon of any government is capable of taking out their president, their leader, if they believe that their leader really does threaten their very existence as a country. Not just as an organization like the CIA, but the country.
Amazing. So many of these issues that were like that in 63 are kind of the same way now. I see that especially with just the media and how they spin things. And but I mean, the media is also so very important too. But it just seems, I hate to think that everything is a conspiracy theory, and I don't like going down the roads of like, well, our elections are fixed and things like that,
right.
Because that's a slippery slope. And I think is. And that's such a huge, that in itself is such a huge undertaking and conspiracy that it would be almost just the magnitude of it would be impossible. But it's just so strange to me that we live in a day and age where we have this information at our fingertips all the time, and we're able to share things instantaneously around the globe, that there's still so many secrets that are still out there and things that we don't know about. And I don't know if there is still this group, this upper echelon still controlling things like they were in 63. But I have to think that there is something to that effect now, that it's even much more sophisticated and I guess treacherous, you know?
Absolutely. Again, it's about gaining power and keeping it. That's the bottom line. That's the controlling principle of any society, is who has the power? What are they using that power for? Are they using it to benefit humanity? Are they using it to establish a country as the beacon of responsibility or freedom or democracy? No. I think a lot of it is self-interest. And the biggest conspiracy isn't really a conspiracy. Back then, in 63, when you have the former director of the CIA saying nobody will read the record that the Warren Commission creates because nobody in this country reads. That was in 63. That was during the time of liberation, when college students were saying, no, there has to be more than this. They were incredibly educated. They were incredibly motivated. But to have that kind of cynicism back then, imagine, like you said, 60 years later, when we have just a deluge of opinion, stories, comments. It is overwhelming. So our dumbing down wasn't anti-intellectualism in the 1980s with Ronald Reagan. Now it's the digital dumbing down of everybody, because people aren't on their phones reading; they're on their phones playing, and so newspapers or magazines going under. This is just a sign of our lack of connectivity towards true fact-finding, informative, being informed, being, self-educated. It's a dying art, I guess, is what I'm saying. I mean, you could literally wade for days and days and days through all of this stuff and still not come to any conclusions, still not know what to believe, now there's too much information, and much of it is suspect. But I suppose that if you are conspiratorial in your view, you could say to yourself, that's exactly why we have social media like Twitter, like Facebook. Keep you dumb, keep you docile, keep you, just instead of really approving or disapproving of something, simply just expressing yourself with a like button, a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And now that's your opinion. That's your world opinion. Yeah. Our attention span has also gone down, obviously. So it's hard not to say that this isn't part of some way to keep us all, docile and controlled.
And distracted.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because there's all this information that's out there. Like if you want to talk about, I don't know, COVID, if you want to talk about anything like that, there's so much information that is just put out there without much responsibility. And then it's up to you. And then it's up to you to kind of search for, the retraction or the correction, which might be out there, but it's another news cycle. The news cycle keeps going, and then another story will come up, and then you forget about it. And then they're still talking about, a year later, how we were distracted back then. And like, no, there was a retraction. There was a correction to that. Well, nobody got that. They got the they got the headline. So the killing of an American president, I still boil it down to just the basic thing that at some point somebody said, yeah, let's do it. Somebody pulled the trigger. Somebody gave the order.
Or somebody paid to have the trigger pulled.
Right.
Yes.
Sure. but that decision was made and it was carried out and it was implemented and then it was covered up.
Yep. Yep.
Are we ever going to get those papers that the Biden administration's been teasing us for? I mean, they've been teasing the release for a while, not just the Biden administration.
Yeah,
He's just in power now.
Every preceding presidency has obviously done its part in keeping these things from release. But great strides have been made. And yes, of course, one day, ultimately, all the documents will be released. But again, they are sanitized, they are redacted. And if anybody thinks that whoever was responsible for this, whether the different parts that were responsible or in tandem, left a paper trail, you are sadly mistaken. This is not something that they sat down and said, okay, it's not like they got into a big arena with 20,000 of the co-conspirators and said, okay, here's our agenda. How do we get this done? Okay, 1A, B, C, 2A, B, C. No, that's not how, first of all, that's not how intelligence agencies work. And that's not how powerful people get things done. It's something that's mentioned, then someone takes that initiative and simply does it. It's passed down mouth to mouth, agreement to agreement, handshake to a handshake. Very little is going to be put down on paper anyway. So like I said, I think the majority of our responsibility as historians, journalists, students of this case is simply to establish as best we can a consensus. Okay, so what are the most controversial points? What is it that we have not established and that we've come to a consensus to? Because believe me, I think that a lot of the time we have controversies even within the JFK community simply to generate more books. Okay, if there wasn't a controversy, if we all come to a consensus, who the hell is going to publish anything anymore? So I think that's why there was a lot of backstabbing in the JFK community that, I know the secret, but I can't tell you because you might divulge it before I can. It's the only way that you can write something is to spin it a different way. So that's why all these controversies have to keep, even within, it's like it's been said before that the U.S. government couldn't have thought of a better way to cover up this case than to let us, the JFK research community, try to solve the case. We are doing their bidding for them because, we're fighting amongst ourselves. We can't come to a consensus. We're asking for things that the government long ago destroyed, and they're just giggling because we're waiting patiently. So our expectations of what is still in the archives, I really think has to be tempered. And I think that we have to master what has already been released. That is, we have to process all of the hundreds of thousands of documents that have already been released. Once we do that, once we see through that, once we, I don't mean to be long-winded, but in my extensive experience with trying to get intelligence documents, specifically the FBI, their entire motive operandi is to try to frustrate the person who is seeking these documents. So they will either put you on a slow track to get them. Once you get them, they may not be, pages might be missing. If you study intelligence documents, you have trained yourself to read through redactions because you're familiar with what's being talked about. And sometimes if a person's name is blacked out, you can count the spaces of the line above to know how long that redacted name is, and you make an educated guess. So you're processing, you're trying to read through their obfuscations, and that takes a long time. Well, then what, of course, if you discover, and you can, this has happened to me, that they've redacted something they're not supposed to redact. Well, then you send it back to the FBI and you say, okay, unredact that. But now that takes the time to prove that you know what the redaction is, and then send it to a judge. The judge looks at the unredacted document and then he makes the ruling. Okay, now you can have your unredacted. It's this constant. That's why the 900-page FBI file of John Lennon took 25 years to unearth. John Lennon, okay, a peacenik, so it's that kind of frustration. So let's deal with what we already have. Let's create a master list of all the questions that still are being bandied about and that we haven't come to a consensus to. Let's try to come to a consensus as a community. And if we've got to do that by, again, continuing to have conferences or, newsletters or what have you, then whatever is the most effective way to say as a community, as a body, because maybe if we come together as a body, we'll have more influence over the legislators to whom we want to curry favor. That is, these aren't the only documents we want released, So, how about, Robert Kennedy's assassination records? How about, Kent State, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, all the things that have just been put in the basement and forgotten about. How about us as a entity, as a body, as an interested, I'm not going to say party because I don't want to, conjure up an idea of a political party, but that has influence and has an actual agenda to get these things released, to get them out into the open. Because again, what we should be all about is transparency, and nothing feeds conspiracy faster or more eagerly than opaqueness or the common lines of this is national security or, no. Transparency is what's going to defuse conspiracy theories.
Amazing. Now, you spent a considerable amount of time and through your life and through your career of all the studying these political assassinations of the 1960s. What was it about the 60s where there was just unrestrained attempts at controlling everything? What fed into that so much that you have, like you just went through a list of all these political assassinations that happened, and maybe they still happen but not like that certain period of time,
right?
When you're talking about everybody.
Well, I think that you talk, to borrow a phrase from today, I think the 1960s was the first time we really, as a society, became woke. And it too was a very divisive, even from my understanding, because I was born in 1967, so it's not like I was part of the liberation movement, but it was a time where everything was right for all the disparate groups to come together and be not individual liberation groups, but a liberation, wave across the country. And we're not just talking about Latinos, gays, Black liberation, but we're talking, or anti-war demonstration. We're talking about, student liberation, or child labor laws, women's rights, that kind of thing. It was all a confluence at that time because the time was right. Out of the 1950s, and that momentum started, and then the hope and the promise. Well, things have to change in order for that to take place. So all of it came together, and no one can really know why it happens at a certain time. But the last time that our country was so divided, and the last time that the power structure was so acutely threatened, was the Civil War. So I think that when all of these people and their consciousness come together, not individually, well, that's your argument, this is my argument, that's your cause, this is my cause, all coming together, that scared the shit out of the power structure. And I think that they pushed their influence into these liberation movements as much as they could to foment dissent within these organizations, so they would either kill each other or be killed in the chaos of it all. So when they sent overtired young National Guard onto the campus of Kent State, they knew exactly what was going to happen.
Oh.
They didn't know exactly what or how, but they knew that if you put a police presence in this protest, this anti-war protest, that the tensions were going to rise. If the National Guard had never shown up, the worst thing that would have happened was the ROTC building would have burned to the ground. Big deal. But of course, the power structure then alerts everybody who isn't a radical or a hippie or a lefty or a commie that, hey, if they burn down the ROTC, your house is next. If we don't stop them here, they're going to march right into your, white picket fence neighborhood and destroy you too. So it was using fear to motivate the power structure to do whatever it could to suppress dissent and the cause of liberation, not only here, but also around the world. So that's why I think we saw so many political assassinations. And if they were not, in fact, a state-sponsored assassination, like with Fred Hampton, which was a state-sponsored assassination, you can at least say that the effect of that person's death had political ramifications. And that is the definition of a political assassination. You don't have to be killed by somebody in government for it to be political.
You mentioned Fred Hampton. Now, is that kind of the focus of your research and study now?
Yes, it is. And for the last 30 years. And almost 25 of those have been spent trying to get his FBI file. So when I talked about my experience with the FBI, that's exactly what I was talking about.
That's a lot of FOIA requests.
Well, actually, it's only one. But when I realized how little they had actually given me, that's when my requests then were ignored. They never complied with my original request because I was one of those people that pissed them off. I knew what I was asking for, and I knew where to tell them to look. See, most of the time, FOIAs are filed by journalists who are looking for quick information. So their FOIA request will be very vague, very broad, and the FBI loves that.
Yeah.
Because they can hide behind, well, this is what you asked for, and this is what we gave you. Even though the person receiving that information, oh man, I should have said this. I wanted this, not this. So because I was familiar with bureauese, because I was familiar with where they hid their files, and I was familiar with their filing processes, I was able to construct a very detailed FOIA request. So that's why, it's not why they put me on the slow path to getting them. It's Fred Hampton's file was 3 times as large as we were led to believe. Now, when I say we, there has been very little ever written about Fred Hampton. Just within the last 7 years, only 2 books have been written about Fred Hampton. And those are the only 2 that exist. One was written by a lawyer that represented Fred Hampton's family in a civil suit against the city of Chicago. Mm-hmm. The other book was by Jacoby Williams, who didn't write about Fred Hampton per se. He wrote about the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, which Fred Hampton was deputy chairman of. So obviously he mentioned Fred Hampton, but Hampton was not the primary focus of his study. It was the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. So when I started when I delved into the Fred Hampton case in the early mid-1990s, I had very little to work off of. So I went to the People's Law Office that they were the people responsible for the civil trial. And I luckily, I don't know how, got into their court documents and was able to at least establish what Fred Hampton's file looked like, because they sued the FBI for, at least in court, to be able to see Fred Hampton's file. So my reading their court documents, I was under the impression that Fred Hampton's file was only 12 volumes long, about 4,000 pages. So when the FBI got my request, they said, well, we found all the material you asked for, but it's not 4,000 pages, it's 35,000 pages. So they have to process all 35,000 pages, theoretically, if they're going to comply with my request. So what they would have to do is they would have to make copies of everything. So they'd have to copy 35,000 documents. Then they'd have to go through each document with a cheat sheet. There's a list of exemptions that the FBI can use to withhold certain information from an FBI document, like informants, like police informants, the identity of police informants, or the other privacy acts, which is ironic because the only reason we have these documents is because the FBI, in fact, impeded on everybody's privacy. They tap their phones, they open their mail. That's an invasion of privacy. My finding out the name of the person whose privacy you usurped, that's not an invasion of privacy. Anyway, so once they're finished redacting, then they make a copy of that, then they send it to me. So it takes a while, right?
Right.
But when I got the first 10,000 pages and I was reading through them, I was discovering where they had put other files that were created on Fred Hampton and where they were located. I discovered different kinds of documents that I had not yet received, which I should have. So I made this 7-page list of areas of noncompliance. I sent it to them, and that's when the document stopped and when I didn't get any response. So what is an independent historian like me, what am I supposed to do to compel the FBI to do what they were supposed to do by law? Well, it's either keep hounding them, which doesn't do any good if they ignore you, or hire a lawyer, which of course I don't have the means to do. So for the last few years, I have been trying to find a lawyer that would try to help me to very little avail. But anyway, so yes, my interest in Fred Hampton was, like I said, it's the fact that it was a state-sponsored assassination. It was without doubt an egregious example of that, of how far the FBI went to make sure that another Black leader like Malcolm X, like Martin Luther King, would not rise up and unify not just Black people, but, Robert Kennedy was unifying the country. So, and Fred Hampton was very much like that. At 21 years old, he wasn't competing with other groups in Chicago. He was meeting with them. He was going to their rallies. They were co-sponsoring each other. They were, if the Chicago police or the FBI raided their headquarters and set it on fire, boom, there would be funds. There would be a fundraiser and funds would be given. So there was a cooperative in Chicago that Fred Hampton was largely responsible for, being a unifying presence in the attempt to do what the Dealey machine claimed it was doing, and that is, improving the neighborhoods and blah, 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 blah. No, it was the Black Panther Party that was feeding children and educating them and starting free health clinics and, that kind of thing. It wasn't the city that was doing it. It was the Black Panther Party. So the elimination of Fred Hampton was a necessity after he had gone to Canada and did a tour of Canadian universities. Now he's not just worrying himself about liberation movements in the United States. He is now concerning himself with liberation movements outside of the United States. So the Indian Métis organizations in Canada, who he met with, the students that were affected by these kind of oppressive, not only legislation, but also attitudes. Similarly here in the United States. So the United States wasn't the only country that was affected by revolution or revolutionary ideas or even liberation movements. It was all across the world in the 1960s, including Canada. And a lot of people don't realize that. They think, Canada, it's, the mini USA, but so Fred was now taking the plight of Black America internationally, just like Malcolm did, just like Martin Luther King did, just like Stokely Carmichael did. And he was very effective because he was very compelling in his argument, his passion, his discipline, the fact that he was so young and could command the language and the ideas and the love of his people, and be willing to lay down his life for that. It was really inspiring.
Yeah, I just started doing some research on it myself, and 21 years of age.
Yes.
And they must have found him to be a huge threat. I mean, he was, well, the story is, the raid, he was drugged and shot and killed.
He was.
Political assassination. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, when the FBI conspires not only with the Chicago police, but also the state's attorney's office, which then cooperates with the state's attorney general, and military intelligence group, the 113th Military Intelligence Group, in I believe it was it Evanston, Illinois? They all had a hand in it. So when you and I'm sorry that you have to rely on the internet for whatever research you're doing on Fred Hampton, because so little of it is even accurate. But I put that on me because I haven't done anything. I haven't written anything or published anything to put out there to counter all the crap that's out there. So, as I can sit back here and say, "Oh, I know better than you," but I haven't contributed anything. So, until I do that, I guess I really have to just.
I haven't.
Be careful of what you believe when you read, and any questions about Fred Hampton, you feel free to contact me directly.
Oh, sure. I mean, I'm not. I haven't filled out a FOIA for red and black files or searching before and after. I mean, I haven't done those things yet, but I know that you have.
But you should. But you should. See, now that's the thing. Now I'm a substitute teacher. I've been so for the last 10 years. If I was an actual teacher that had control over the curriculum, I would require my students to file a FOIA request and show them how to do it, because it's not about what would 15 and 16-year-olds be interested in any FBI documents. That's not the point. The point is that every document that our public officials create is public domain. And if we don't get them released, they're not going to voluntarily say, "Oh, well, it's time for us to release these documents," or release them once we've created them. I'm talking about the ones that were generated in the 50s and 60s and 70s. They will remain buried, doing no one any good unless we ask for them through FOIA. That's the whole purpose of the law. So here are some topics that you could ask for, or individuals, because it's not just Fred Hampton whose file has still not been released. I'm the only non-lawyer to see Fred Hampton's file. It has not been released. It hadn't been even when I asked for it 23 years ago. It's not just the individuals in the Black Panther Party that have files. It's the organizations themselves. So I'm still to this day kicking myself that at the same time that I was making a FOIA request for Fred Hampton's file, that I did not at the same time make a request for the Black Panther Party file from Chicago. That, I hear, is over 200 volumes. And every volume is between 300 and 500 pages. I should have done it at the same time, but I was narrowly focused on Fred Hampton. Anyway, so every state, every city where the Black Panther Party existed had a chapter or a branch. Their FBI file. Then, of course, all the people that were members of the Black Panther Party in that city or in that state have individual files. So now you get an idea of just how vast the net was just over the Black Panther Party. Well, that was only one of scores of Black liberation groups in the 1960s. So again, now you're getting an idea of just how much we still have to release. So I would have my students say, you file this FOIA request, and it doesn't matter if the FBI complies with it before you graduate. You stay with it. And once you get that file that you've asked for, donate it to a public library. Donate it to the university where you go. If all you do is simply get it released, even if you never read it, because you could give a shit about what, this person or this organization did, just get it out there. So I'm urging you, Brian, if you've got anything you want to FOIA, do it.
Yeah, I was, this is totally off topic, but there is a researcher that is busy studying the government's role in missing people in national parks. And he is a former lawman, and he has filed all these FOIA requests over the missing people in Rocky Mountain National Park, Yellowstone National Park, all these national parks where there's missing people. It's very interesting. I won't go into deep with you, but he has been finding all this resistance to these FOIA requests too from the government who don't, they either want to charge him like $1 million to compile all these lists and a photocopy.
Right.
They want to charge this incredible sum of money for the labor that's involved in putting together these requests, or he's just been flat out denied illegally.
Right.
Yeah, they're not supposed to ask you why you want these files. So I know the government, it's almost like set up for us to be so discouraged that we'll just give up.
They know that you don't have the means to fight them in court, fight them for years and years and years. Again, like I said, most of these requests are from journalists, right? Who need something right away. And they can fast track, a few documents or even a few files. They can fast track that. They certainly do it for legislators all the time. But if you frustrate people long enough, they'll just give up. So frustrate them, don't give them what they need, intentionally send them something they didn't ask for, and they'll give up. So, but I'm not going to. I can't. So
keep up the good fight, man.
Absolutely. It's a constant fight. We always have to stay with it.
Craig, this has been
we have what for 60 years. So, the fight's still going strong.
I have to tell you, this has been, I've been looking forward to this conversation, and I'm glad that we were able to have it. I know that we, things come up and, we rescheduled and whatnot, but to have this opportunity to sit with you and to talk and to explore these concepts and this almost alternative reality. I mean, we all have this shared reality of the American experience, and we all read our history textbooks, but we have this reality that it's like beyond my fingertips. I sense it. I read about it, but I just know that there's just, I don't know if things will ever be revealed to a guy like me, just a normal average guy in Omaha, Nebraska. Right. But these questions that are out there, I at my age, I'm just not ready to kind of give up on them and stop thinking about them and stop exploring them. So having you on the program, man, I mean, I know I'm not near as researched as you, but I just found it just entirely fascinating to delve into this with you and for you to take the time, man. What an experience.
Well, it's not just, the experience that you have right now. You're obviously still, it's a video, and so you're going to continue your reading and your research, but your program, that makes the difference. Just having it exist, and then having people on who can, elucidate things and illuminate things. That's incredibly important. I had mixed feelings about even my work on the JFK assassination, my contribution being the Dealey Plaza schematic and the master list of witnesses. Like I told you before, in order to get published on the JFK assassination, you have to have a new slant, right? Or something new that you're revealing that you discovered by yourself, I hadn't done that. But the one thing that I could contribute to that, I didn't want to just be in a line of 2,000 other books that are competing for people's attention. I wanted to contribute something that hadn't been done before, or at least not to this extent. So I decided that it was going to have witnesses that I could then publish and that people could display on a map that they could use for either just their own reference or for when they do presentations and lectures. So any contribution, and now that we are in this digital age where we can do podcasts and we can do, immediate sharing of information like this, that's incredibly important. That's your contribution. So, you'll catch up with the research, you'll catch up with being knowledgeable and all of that. But in the meantime, just the fact that you put that out there and that you have your podcast and your own delivery system, that's your contribution. That's equally important. So I appreciate you having me on and having the show. So please, keep it up.
All right. Yours in the pursuit, indeed.
Thank you so much, sir. And we'll talk soon.
All right, Craig. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
There we are, kids. Researcher, historian, Craig Ciccone. There's a lot to wrap your head around in that conversation. I thank Craig so much for being a part of the program. You can't trust the FBI. You can't trust the CIA. You can't trust the federal government. You can't trust the Republicans. You can't trust the Democrats. Who in the world can you trust? Me. That's who. You can trust nothing but the truth here at the Necronomicast. Next episode 215, to close out the year, I have the dynamic duo, the paranormal pair of Amy Bruni and Adam Berry from the hit TV show Kindred Spirits on the eve of the 6th season release. That episode will be dropping December 15th, and their season 6 debut will be on December 18th. You're going to love it. Great conversation with them and a great conversation with Craig. Great conversations with everybody all year long here at the Necronomicast. Looking forward to a big year next year in 2022. So thank you for your listenership and your support. This episode, copyright 2021, all rights reserved. The Necronomicast from Omaha, Nebraska. Go get some sleep, friends.